Hello, welcome to a series called Read Poorly by Tom the Scapegoat. I am your host, Tom the Scapegoat, and today we'll be reading poorly out of the Encyclopedia of Occultism and Parapsychology, 5th edition. The entry will be Rome, Ancient Religion and Magic. Magical practice was widespread among the ancient Romans. Magic was integral to their worship and operated as an organized system of magical rites for communal ends. Magic formed a foundation for thought and outlook upon the world, entered daily life, and directly affected many laws and customs. This ingrained tendency eventually developed into a broad polytheistic system, which led during bad times, especially in the later years of the empire, to a frenzied search for new gods, borrowed from various countries Rome had conquered. In times of misfortune and disaster, the Romans were always ready to utilize a non-Roman deity if his or her favors promised more than those of their own deities. Although there was a strong conservative element in the populace, and the custom of elders was strongly upheld by the priestly fraternity, this usually gave way before the momentary impulses of the people. Thus, as a rock shows its geological history by its differing strata, so the theogony of the Roman gods tells its tale of the race that conceived it. There are prehistoric nature deities borrowed from indigenous tribes, gods of the Sabines, from whom the young colony stole its wives, gods of the Etruscans, and gods of the Egyptians, Greeks, and Persians. The temple of Jupiter on the Capitol contained the altar of an ancient deity, a stone god, Terminus, the spirit of boundaries. In the temple of Diana of the Grove, a fountain nymph was worshipped. Additional instances of this kind abound. Belief in spirits. In addition to the gods, the spirits needed to be propitiated. Indeed, the objects offered to the Romans for veneration were seemingly numberless. Apuleius gave a description of popular supernaturalism when he told of a country road where one might meet an altar wreathed with flowers, a cave hung with garlands, an oak tree laden with horns of cattle, a hill marked by fences and as sacred, a log rough-hewn into shape, an altar of turf smoking with libations, or a stone anointed with oil. Every single action of a man's daily life had a presiding spirit, as did commerce and husbandry. Ednia was concerned with eating and Patina with drinking. Other spirits oversaw departures, travel and approaching, and homecoming. In commerce, Mercurius reigned as spirit of gain, and Pecunia of money. Farmers had to pay attention to the spirits of cutting, grinding, sowing, and beekeeping. A deity presided over streets and highways. Cloacina served as goddess of the sewers, while the lowly Mephitis was the spirit of bad smells. Spirits of evil, such as Robijo, the spirit of mildew, also had to be propitiated by pacificatory rites. In Rome, there was an altar to fever and bad fortune. From the country came Silvanus, god of farms and woods, and his fauns and nymphs with Picus, the woodpecker god, who fed the twins Romulus and Remus with berries. Each deity or spirit possessed some influence and had to be approached with proper rites. The names of these spirits were inscribed on tablets. I've had a hard time with this word. I've recorded this like 6 or 7 or 8 times. Indigitamenta, which is, the priest's book of rites, which were in charge of the pontiffs or priests, who thus knew which spirit to evoke according to their need. Most of these spirits were animistic in origin. Rites and worship. Worship in ancient Rome consisted largely of magical rites, destined to propitiate the powers controlling human beings, to bring people into touch with those powers, to renew life and the land that supported it, and to stop that process of degeneration constantly set in motion by evil forces. Everything connected with worship typified this restoration. The priests, who represented the life of the community, were therefore bound by strict observances from endangering it in any way. Rules as to attire, eating, and touch were numerous. Sacrifices were systematized according to the end desired and the deity invoked. Worship instructions designated the age and gender of all animal sacrifices. Oxen were to be offered to Jupiter and Mars, and swine to Juno, Ceres, the corn goddess, and Sylvanus. At one shrine, a pregnant cow was sacrificed, and the ashes of the unborn young were considered to be of special magical efficacy. Even human sacrifice existed within historical times. After the Battle of Cannae, the Romans sought to divert misfortune by burying 2 Greeks alive in the cattle market, while in the time of Julius Caesar, 2 men were put to death with sacrificial solemnities by the pontiff and Flamen of Mars. Again, in the time of Cicero and Horace, boys were killed for magical purposes. Fire possessed great virtue and was held sacred in the worship of Vesta. In early belief, Vesta, being the fire itself, it presided over the family hearth. It restored purity and conferred protection. Blood had the same quality, and smeared on the face of the god, symbolized and brought about the oneness of the deity with the community. On great occasions, the statue of Jupiter was treated thus. The priests of Bayona made incisions in their shoulders and sprinkled the blood upon the image. The face of a triumphant general was painted with vermilion to represent blood. Kneeling and prostration brought one into direct contact with the earth of the sacred place. Music was also used as a species of incantation, probably deriving its origin in sounds made to drive away evil spirits. Dancing, too, was of magical efficacy. In Rome, there were colleges of dancers for the purposes of the religion, youths who danced in solemn measure about the altars, who, in sacred month of Mars, took part in festivals and were sent throughout the city, dancing and singing. One authority stated that there were 4 kinds of holy solemnity: sacrifice, sacred banquets, public festivals, and games. Therefore, performances also belong to this category, in one instance being used as a means of diverting a pestilence. Sacred banquets were often decreed by the Senate as thanksgiving to the gods. Tables were spread with sumptuous repast in the public spaces and were first offered to the statues of deities seated around. The festivals were numerous, all of a magical and symbolic nature. In the spring, there was Parilia, where fires of straw were lighted, through which persons passed to be purified, and the Cerealia, celebrated with sacrifice and offerings to Ceres, the corn goddess, and followed by banquets. The Lupercalia, the festival of Faunus, was held in February and symbolized the awakening of spring and growth. Goats were slain as sacrifice with their blood on the Luperci. Youths clad in skins smeared their faces. They took tongs made of goat skin and laughing wildly rushed through the city, striking the crowd. Roman matrons, believing that the blows thus received rendered them prolific. Juno, the goddess of marriage and childbirth, also had her festival, the Matronalia, celebrated by women of Rome. During festivals of the dead, the door leading to the other world was open, the stone removed from its entrance in the Comitium, and the dark spirits who came forth were appeased with offerings. On these days, 3 times in the year, when the gods of gloom were abroad, complete cessation from all work was decreed. No battle could be fought, nor ship set sail. neither could a man and woman marry. To the sacred games were taken statues of gods in gorgeous procession, chariots of silver, companies of priests and youths singing and dancing. The gods viewed the game reclining on couches. The chariot races also partook the nature of rites. After the races in the field of Mars came one of the most important Roman rites, the sacrifice of the October horse. The right-hand horse of the victorious team was sacrificed to Mars, and the tail of the animal, running with blood, carried to the altar of the Regia. The blood was stored in the temple of Vesta until the following spring and used in the sacrifice of the festival of Parlia. The sacrifice was essentially magical, all citizens present being purified by the blood sprinkling on the bonfire. The Roman outlook upon life was largely colored by magic. Bodily foes had their counterpart in the unseen world. Wandering spirits of the dead, spirits of evil, the anger of innocently offended deities, and the menace of the evil eye. Portents and prodigies were everywhere. In the heavens, strange things might be seen. The sun had been known to double, even treble itself, and light turned to blood. Its light turned to blood, or a magical halo appear around the orb. Can't believe I can't read. Thunder and lightning were always fraught with presage. Jove was angered when he opened the heavens and hurled his bolts down to earth. Phantoms, too, hovered amid the clouds. Upon the Campagna, the gods were observed in conflict, and afterwards tracks of combatants were visible across the plain. Unearthly voices were heard amid the mountains and groves, and cries of portent sounded within the temples. Blood haunted the Roman imagination. Sometimes it was said to have covered the land as a mantle. The standing corn dyed with blood, the rivers and fountains flowing with it, while walls and statues were covered with a bloody sweat. The flight and song of birds might foretell the decrees of fate. Unappeased spirits of the dead were known to lurk near and steal away the souls of men who then died. All these happenings were attributable to the gods and spirits, who, if the portent was one of menace, must be propitiated, if one of good fortune, thanked with offerings. Down to later times, this deep belief in the occurrence of prodigies persisted. When Otho set out for Italy in 69 CE, Rome rang with reports of a gigantic phantom rushing forth from the temple of Juno and the statue of Julius turning from east to west. I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording here. You guys have no idea how hard this has been. You're getting 15 minutes roughly. This has taken me the better part of 3 hours to record because of how often I fucked it up. I hope you're having a good time reading poorly with Tom the Scapegoat. Next up will be divination and augury.